Yo, what's up everyone? I hope you're doing well. Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to do an Oppenheimer spoiler discussion. We're doing it in kind of a podcast form today. I'm doing it with my friend Rowan today.
What's up?
Rowan is one of my good friends. We go to movies together. We just saw Oppenheimer and we're going to discuss all of our thoughts on the movie. Spoiler discussion, kind of spoilers. It's a movie about history, so it's not, but we're going all in depth on this movie, so make sure to stay tuned, leave a like, but let's get right into it. Alright, first up, we're going to go through this movie basically by the time it starts, and we're going to go through the whole runtime. So I want to kind of talk to you, Rowan, about the opening words of this movie. Prometheus stole fire from the gods and gave it to a man. For this he was chained to a rock and tortured for eternity. You know, I think that's a perfect line to open this movie up, because this movie is based on Oppenheimer's book, I'm pretty sure, American Prometheus, and I thought that was just a very smart line, but it's a kind of a denser line, kind of like a scarier line, because, you know, it's basically talking about Prometheus, but it's also talking about Oppenheimer and how he basically stole ideas from like all these different places, and then he got tortured for making this thing that helped the United States, but also tortured Japan. But, you know, I really think that's a great idea. What do you think about this opening words from Oppenheimer?
I really like it. It's one of my favorite openings of all time. I think the thoughts are conveyed perfectly through it. This is the direct opening line from the book, so I think it works really well. And
You know,
I couldn't liken anybody further from or similarly to Prometheus to Oppenheimer.
I really do think that's awesome too, and I think the score behind it, Ludwig van Göransson's score, he also did Tenet, did Black Panther, did Creed movies. I think that the score during this scene is also excellent. You have the boom, 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 boom with the fire loading behind it. The score is just outstanding. I want to hear your quick thoughts on the score before we get into the basically start of the film.
Well, you can't forget the Mandalorian. First off,
Mando.
I really enjoyed the score for it. My personal favorite score part of the movie was just the intro. I'm a big sucker for synths, and I think that was done really well. And then it being reverberated back and at the very end of the movie, very good. Definitely my favorite part.
I think there's a lot of strings in it. You know, some of the score, I kind of got thoughts on it because it kind of reminded me of the Harry Potter theme during some of those scenes when when he's at the school and becoming a professor. I think that some of that reminded me of Harry Potter, but it's all mixed together with some different instruments. There's a lot of different instruments. Kind of reminds me of Hans Zimmer to the Dune. He used a lot of different instruments. But yeah, the opening words of this movie just prepares you for what's to come, because it's a whole dense film that's to come. But start of the film basically shows Oppenheimer's college life, and I want to talk about the poison apple. He tried to poison his tutor in college, and this is actually a true fact in the American Prometheus book, which I find kind of horrible, but I think that this also builds on the tension of how Oppenheimer was bullied as a kid, and even talks about that in the documentary that's on Peacock right now if you guys are going to want to go watch it. But the documentary says that Oppenheimer was bullied as a kid when he went to like summer camps, and he just took it. He took the bullying. He didn't fight back. And you really do see this in the opening montage, like we're saying, when you just have those shots on his face laying in bed because he can't go to bed. He's just staying up, and then you see his mind, kind of like the quantum realm in his mind, all the atoms moving around. Pretty sure that was shot practically. I'm really interested in your thoughts here, Rowan, about the college life and how he was bullied a lot, and how the poison apple scene. How did you react to that when you first saw it?
First off, I really enjoyed the practical shots of the quantum realm. It was one of my favorite parts about the entire movie. I thought it was an interesting lens because we saw probably his most vulnerable state in his opening college years. We see the start of the movie where is, how did you enjoy your time in Europe? I didn't. There was I greatly enjoyed that. That was I think a very nice starting touch. It sets up the whole movie.
Yeah, and I want to build on that by talking about Hoyte van Hoytema's cinematography. And one of my favorite shots, it's just such a simple shot. It brings it back in the end of the movie. But before we're going on Oppenheimer in his college years, you see just this camera shooting down on the ground. It's wet. The raindrops are dropping on the ground. Close-ups on that. And I think that just builds because you see it later in the film when their camera's pointing down at one of the maps in one of the AC's meeting, and I think the raindrops are kind of like symbolism for bombs dropping on different areas. I don't know if you felt the same way, but I felt like that shot really did work a lot, and they brought it back in the end. I want to hear your thoughts on that one.
I really liked it. I didn't necessarily catch the same symbolism as you did. I think the more symbolism and stuff that I saw was during the B-52 flight. But I do see what you mean, and I could definitely liken it to that.
Yeah, and I kind of just a little bit more on the college life and the poison apple. I do think that Nolan added this in to kind of use a little bit of humor, levity in the situation, but it is kind of a horrible situation. But I feel like he's weaving this in just to make it a little less serious, and then he uses it when Niels Bohr comes in and he takes the apple away, and he's like, "Oh, wormhole in it." I feel like that could add just a little bit of humor to this movie where it needs it, because the movie actually has a couple of pretty funny scenes, especially with Matt Damon's character, General Groves. So I think Nolan is doing a great job with the script, with adding a lot of dialogue, a lot of like horror moments, but also a lot of humor. I don't know if you looked at it the same way as Nolan putting some moments of levity in the film. I want to hear your thoughts and see if you think there's levity in the film.
For sure. I think that there were some accidental ones that the audience in our theater thought was kind of funny. However, there was definitely comedy to be had in the movie. Humor. I think Matt Damon's character in general, was a very large purpose of his character.
I bet Matt Damon's character was that piece of the puzzle, and I think that sometimes those general people, even in real life, can have that horrible sense of humor, so I really get on that. But then during the movie, you go through those parts of his university, and then he goes back to the US to basically start his own physics program, and he's with Ernest Lawrence, played by Josh Hartnett. I thought Josh Hartnett did a really good job playing opposite of him, and I do love this kind of feeling that Oppenheimer basically started his own program, and he started with one kid, and then you have the shot of the board, and then it shoots back, and then you have many other kids in the classroom. I've seen this shot done many times in other movies, but I think Nolan makes it work so much because Oppenheimer only started with one person in his class, and then he's just so smart. He got so many other people to join because everyone's interested in his new ideas, which I just think is very interesting. And I do love all this when they went back to the US, because, I think that if we stayed too much in his college life, I think it would have slogged down the film just a little bit. So I'm happy that they moved pretty fast back to US. And then this kind of builds onto the point where Oppenheimer goes to the party. We meet Gene Tatlock, and we basically know what happens there. They have their little sex scene. A lot of people thought the sex scene was going to be 15 minutes. I don't know if you saw the rumor for that, but I thought that rumor was pretty funny. It started on TikTok. I don't know why people thought it was going to be 15 minutes. Nolan doesn't. This is his first sex scene in a movie. I thought it was kind of well done. I do like how it didn't go on for too long, because some things can get very awkward. But I do love how it's shot. It didn't show too much. It didn't want to go like prolonged full nudity section. You didn't see any of Cillian Murphy's nudity. You only saw Florence Pugh. So I don't know. I want to hear your thoughts on basically Oppenheimer and his basically time in the US and starting his own physics program. And give me a little bit of your thoughts on Gene Tatlock before we talk about her more in the coming sections of the film.
I very much liked it. I thought the idea of socialism and stuff as being sort of a backdrop during it all was very insightful, because I personally did not know about that very much. It helps set up for his distrust in later parts of the movie, is his relationship with Gene Tatlock, kind of inciting that why General Groves was hesitant, but ultimately excited to accept him into the project because of his views, because he knew that he could help control him. I think it's an important distinction that he never joined with the Communist Party, but that a focus of that he was very much thinking into those ideas, the Spanish Revolution at the time.
That's a big part of the movie, yeah, what you were talking about, the Communist Party, and how it basically kind of leads to his downfall, him hanging out with a lot of communists, and he did send money to them, correct? I heard in the movie that he did send some money to them through the Communist Party, kind of. But
that is correct, yes.
I do think that, I think the scenes with Florence Pugh, I think they had great chemistry there, and I really do think that helps to when you get to the later part of the film when Gene Tatlock does die. We'll get to that later, but we go back to the points of when Oppenheimer is at the university, and he's actually brought onto the project by General Groves, who's played by Matt Damon. I want to talk about Matt Damon. I think Matt Damon, his acting here was actually pretty damn good. I heard a fact that Matt Damon was about to take a break from acting, but then he got called on to this movie from Christopher Nolan, and he literally went right onto the movie of Christopher Nolan because every actor wants to work with Christopher Nolan because you can see in this movie, Christopher Nolan brings out the best acting of his cast. Everyone gave an A+ performance, and Matt Damon, he gave an A+ performance as the general, and I think every general could be pretty bad, but I think General Groves, he actually had a little bit of humanity in him, which I really liked, and I really liked how they showed that. And this kind of brings us on to Los Alamos because he got recruited onto the project. But I do want to hear your thoughts on Matt Damon and his performance as General Groves really quick.
Personally, one of my favorite generals and just influences, and as a set piece, it's always hard to view the general character, and I think it's either a movie's favorite or a movie's least favorite. And I think it was very good. I think it was very instrumental in how we approached the story, seeing sort of the outside view, seeing the military's view, especially on how with the Manhattan Project of viewing
Yeah.
this and how, yeah, I'm struggling to put it to words, but
Yeah, it's kind of hard to put to words because of the topic that we're talking about, but I get like a lot of audiences will agree with it because Matt Damon really he's a really likable actor, and seeing him in this kind of general role is really interesting. But I think he fits it really well. But that leads us to the point of like the recruiting of the different scientists. Him, General Groves, and Oppenheimer go across the land to go recruit all these scientists. We have Josh Peck in here, Devin Bostick from Diary of a Wimpy Kid as Roderick. That's just amazing casting. Jack Quaid from The Boys. We got so many other people. Josh Hartnett, he also was brought onto the project later. Dylan Arnold, his brother, who played his brother in this one. Alex Wolff in this one. Benny Safdie was on this one. I really did like that little montage of him bringing on different scientists. Fast cuts are also in this one. And I do like everyone cast in this one. I want to hear your thoughts on the whole cast and how they basically did in this one. All the different scientists, and what do you think of all the different cameos from all the actors?
very nice. I couldn't have appreciated it more. Personally, my favorite of the recruitment had to be Rami Malek. The whole theater thought it was super funny. He kind of played a awkward scientist role, and it was very nice to see him. Josh Peck, it was very nice to see him. Uh, Casey Affleck, great choices.
Yeah, because Josh Peck, we haven't seen him in a long time in any form of media. So it was kind of astonishing to see him get cast in this like way before the movie came out. Him in the trailer, because he's very prominent in the trailer and in the movie because his character does get to push the button. And I was actually very interested that he cast Josh Peck because he wasn't in a lot of things. And Devin Bostick, who played Roderick, I mean, I guess he just likes them. I don't know how they were brought onto the project. Maybe they took auditions. But I just find that so interesting that he casts so many popular people, but he also casts people that haven't been in things in a long time. And also that kind of brings us to the point of the build up of Los Alamos. Basically, Oppenheimer takes General Groves to Los Alamos, where Oppenheimer and his wife, they go horse riding there. And it's a nice place for him and his brother to go camping up there. I'm pretty sure they show that in the film. But I did love them building. They built a whole town there. Like, it's just ridiculous how they built a whole town. And I think it would be very interesting if that was today, because you'd have so much surveillance there if this story happened like today, because you would have no privacy. There would be no place for something like this, Los Alamos. But they built it so far out and so far in the past that no one really knew what was happening and how it was happening. I want to just hear your thoughts on Los Alamos and how the buildup of it happened. And basically, it took place in like the second hour. And how did you think of Los Alamos? Did you like how they set it up? Do you like the production design of it? And what'd you think of it overall?
I very much liked it. It was my favorite set of the whole movie. We spent a lot of time there. I very much liked, they said during uh, one part that it was the cult of Oppie. that was just the setting up of Los Alamos and
Yeah, it's
just
excellent
how we got
production
all these
design.
instrumental people there.
They
Yeah.
they used a real setting to all of it's just real. There's no like CGI green screen backgrounds, and you can really notice it because no one's shot on film, so you can really notice all those particular landscapes and all everything surrounding it. And that kind of builds up before we get to the bomb and everything before that. I want to talk about Oppenheimer's affair with Jean Tatlock. We're back to talking about Jean Tatlock and her death. You know, Florence Pugh played Jean Tatlock. I think Florence Pugh is excellent in everything that she does, and she's only in this film for about 5 to 10 minutes. And her death was actually seen as a murder or a suicide. You know, in the documentary I watched, no one actually knows if she was murdered or she suicided in her own bathroom. You know, it kind of looks like a suicide because she wrote a note, but who knows? Maybe she got murdered in there, which is really horrible to think about. But I did also love Oppenheimer's conversation with her in her little apartment, and I thought that's just a great scene and great dialogue between them. Talks about just how Oppenheimer he wants to go back to her, but he has a wife, Kitty, played by Emily Blunt. But yeah, this death was actually very well done, kind of like heartbreaking because it's someone that he loved, but someone that he had an affair with, and he has a panic attack in the forest. Emily Blunt goes to go confront him there. Beautiful scenery, beautiful cinematography there. I just want to hear your thoughts on like the affair with Jean Tatlock, everything in that apartment, and then her death later on, and how do you feel about her death and Florence Pugh's acting in that situation?
Well, I misspoke earlier. I said Casey Affleck as a scientist, and his role during all of this, leading to the ambiguous whether it's a suicide or murder, was very very important to me as in part of the storytelling. Florence Pugh, I think, did a very very good job. Again, another part of the movie that I very much liked. I think just one of my top three performances for the movie.
Really?
Yes,
That's actually
truly.
surprising to hear because she was hardly in it, but she was actually a main player. She had a lot of sad scenes, even when Oppenheimer chose to go with Kitty's character Emily Blunt and marry her, and then you had that little scene of them by the bed, and she's kind of taking it all in because she doesn't want to get with him in that way. She just wants to be like his side affair during the whole movie. So it's interesting that you have her as one of your favorite performances, but I really do respect it because she's great in here. But do you think that she actually suicided in the bathtub? I know it's a hard subject for a lot of people to talk about, but it's a big subject because it is still a mystery to this day. What do you think happened? Do you think she was murdered by the security detail of Los Alamos, or did you think that she actually did suicide in the end?
I personally think it was a murder. I think with it being an unsigned note, that's an important distinction. And I believe in the movie we saw briefly a black gloved hand,
Yes.
hold her down in the water
Yes.
briefly. Um,
I was going to talk
I
about that too. That's a very very big scene, but a very fast cut because Christopher Nolan probably didn't want to make it so obvious that that was happening because it's not fully
Yep.
in there. But I do think like 70% chance it was murder because even the way she was setting up her suicide, because I think she was about to, but I think it would be pretty hard the way she was going to do it, which we're not going to really go into that because that's a hard road to go through on YouTube. You don't really want to talk about that stuff. But yeah, I think it was a murder, and I think that just leads onto the point where Oppenheimer really did take that death very hard. You see him in the film, he took the call, and he had a whole ass panic attack in the film. And as we said, he goes down to the forest and he basically blames himself for it, but Kitty tells him you can't be the victim for it. You gotta own up and meet it. And his wife Kitty, she dealt with a lot. He had an affair with Jean. He had an affair with Ruthie in the movie, I'm pretty sure too. I feel like that's an interesting scene. I want to hear your thoughts on Kitty and Oppenheimer's relationship because you really do go back to it in the beginning of the film too, when Oppenheimer he really never gave time for Kitty. Kitty was always taking care of their kid, and then he goes back home in that one scene and she's just drunk with a bottle of some alcohol and the kid's just crying. And Oppenheimer tries to go confront Kitty in the whole scene, but then she just goes against him. He's drunk, she's yelling at him, so they got to basically abandon their child to basically reclaim the relationship that just happened. I want to hear your thoughts on Oppenheimer and Kitty's relationship and Emily Blunt's acting in those situations. What do you think of that?
I liked it a lot. I think that it's important to note that their relationship started out as an affair between both of them. They both already had romantic partners,
That's
and
true.
they both set out through the movie that they are not good people necessarily. There it is said to Oppenheimer that because he has that reflection that he is not a good person, that means that he has a humanity to him.
Yeah, I feel like
However, that yeah,
that kind of builds more and more to our next topic, which is the bomb. They're building the bomb during this whole situation. The bomb's almost built by the time Gene Tatlock does die. But then you have Oppenheimer returning on his horse to Los Alamos after riding, because we do know that he rides a horse a lot. He likes to do it. And then he goes into the building where every different scientist is there. They're all talking about the bomb because the Nazis just have been defeated in that scene. And the choice is that they ask Oppenheimer, do you want to continue? How do you want to do this? And he's like, we still got to drop it on Japan. And everyone thinks this is kind of unethical, the decision. And everyone doesn't know if they want to keep doing it, but they got to keep testing it because that's what they're employed to do here. But I do think that this is a very important scene that needs to be shown because they were going to drop it on the Nazis, the Germans, but then they got defeated in the war. So they really just thought that the Japanese weren't going to surrender, but they probably would have. In my opinion, I think Japanese would have surrendered. But, this is a big topic to talk about. You can't change the past, but I do think it's a very important scene to show that they did they kind of wanted to talk about it. It was a hard decision for each scientist to make, but Oppenheimer was the man to kind of make the decision. So I kind of want to hear your thoughts on this specific scene and the Nazis' defeat and what they wanted to do with the bomb. What do you think about that scene?
I think it's rather heartbreaking that they continued on with the project. I do think that what we know from historical evidence that the Japanese would not have surrendered.
Really?
I think no. There's many small islands that for many years, decades even after the war that they were still holding out. Um,
Yeah,
I
it's a
think
very kind of hard note to talk about because you will never know if they were going to, and I think that just builds on the scene because it was a hard decision for them because they didn't really know, they didn't face the Japanese, they didn't really know what was happening. So yeah, I think you're right about this, and I want to really hear your thoughts on. We go to a government scene also before we do test the bomb, and I think this just wraps up how kind of awful some government officials are because they're talking about dropping it on. They're trying to choose a city to drop it on. One of them's like, "Don't drop it on this city because me and my wife vacation there." I think that's just awful that anyone would say that. But I want to hear your thoughts on like that one scene with all the government officials and how you thought that went down and how you thought like how disgusting it was. And you said heartbreaking, like even build off that little heartbreaking scene that you talked about.
I think it's interesting that they, in the choices of when they were picking cities, that they specifically did not choose Kyoto because of its cultural significance. And like he said, because he also vacations there, and
It's horrible.
that was rather disturbing. And I think that they did try and carefully select their targets so as to not maximize casualties, but to prove a point, I still am rather disturbed by that. But it is an important distinction that Oppenheimer did have a choice, and he helped in selection of the targets, trying to go for as few casualties as possible, kind of showing his humanity of that was very hesitant to even continue the project, and that he was continuing a job.
Yeah, he
Um,
was he was
and
he was having a hard time. Like it's hard to see yourself in his position, but he was having a hard time before the war and in his childhood. I think his childhood kind of blends into Los Alamos test and him being bullied back there and not having he couldn't stand up for himself. And I feel like this scene right there also kind of shows signs like he couldn't stand up for himself and make a decision and kind of back out of it and show what he wants to do. This kind of leads up to the Trinity test. And the whole Trinity test sequence is like 20 to 30 minutes long. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but it's a big lead up, and then you have the actual bomb drop. I want to kind of talk about my thoughts for a minute before I go to you, but I think we kind of think the same on this scene, and I think it's one of Nolan's best directed scenes because the 15 minutes leading up to it, when you have the whole countdown, the 20-minute countdown where it starts. You have Ludwig's amazing score in this countdown scene. It got my heart pumping, got me scared. It was like I thought I was going to get a nuke dropped on me, atomic bomb dropped on me. I was not ready for the scene to come. And I saw everyone in our theater. Even on my second watch, I was looking at everyone in my theater. The whole time, everyone was paying so close attention to this specific scene. Everyone was quiet. Josh Peck's about to press the button, and then he does press the button, and we have the bomb drop, and you just have like 30 seconds of quietness. It's just breathing by Oppenheimer. He's looking at it. We see the sight of the bomb. It's all practical, no CGI. It's actually so cool, and it's so amazing how it's really just realistic how they did it. The bomb goes off, it's silent. You see the fire, you see the smoke, you see everything. Everyone's looking at it. And then you just get the big boom in the theater after the silence. And I heard no one making any jokes, because you can agree with this when I throw it over to you, but when I hear silent like scenes in a movie theater, especially IMAX, you have those kids or teens just make like a weird noise just to make people laugh. But the 2 times I watched this, no one makes a noise. It's like you could hear a pin drop, and then you get that boom scene, and that's just an amazing scene. And I think the boom was so loud in IMAX, like the sound just went so crazy. That's why I gotta say, you gotta see it in IMAX. But I'm gonna throw it over to you, Rowan. I want to hear your thoughts on the lead up to the Trinity test and when the bomb dropped, and how you basically saw, how you basically perceived the scene and how you saw the theater react to it. What do you think of that whole situation?
I couldn't agree more with you. It's a very, very, very good scene. Very impactful. I think, touching on your point of, our theater was very reverent towards the movie. Nobody was on their phone. Nobody was making jokes. There was times for like audience laughter, and there were points like that. But everyone was very respectful towards the movie, and especially it being IMAX opening day,
Yeah,
and
because
then your later
usually
showing.
sometimes opening night we have those little annoying audience members, which has kind of made it hard to go to movies after COVID, because after COVID I've noticed that a lot of people have started talking a lot, going on their phones, but I still love going to the theater because that's how I'd want to watch a movie. But yeah, as you were saying, the scene is just so good, and I really do think that the realism of how they dropped the bomb really did make it so well, because then he drops the bomb and you have the silence before the bomb. One of my favorite parts, he says the famous line, "I have become death, destroyer of worlds." I want to hear your thoughts on where the line was placed. It was also placed in the beginning during that one scene, but this is the more important scene that was placed in. What did you think about Nolan's placement of the scene? Like, how did you like that placement?
I really liked it. I think it kind of takes the whole movie together, and is a good explanation of how he felt and his attitudes towards the movie. Just as Cillian Murphy, just as Oppenheimer, and just what he felt
Yeah, because it's
throughout
a
it all.
big line, and I feel like it was probably hard to choose where to put the line, but I think they put it in the most perfect spot, because he says it during silence, and then you just get rewarded with a big explosion, big boom in the theater. But then we kind of land to the point after the bomb. They do fade to black. You get the after the bomb scenes, and everyone is just they're kind of not celebrating yet, because they haven't got the call if they drop the bomb on the 2 points in Japan yet. But then they do. Then most people are celebrating in the streets, but you see Oppenheimer, he's kind of distraught by it. He's disgusted by it. And you get the gymnasium scene, which is one of the biggest scenes in the movie. I kind of also want to talk about how this scene works. I feel like the sound design in this scene, we talked about this a little before, I'm going to let you talk about it. But the sound design in this scene, I really like personally. I love how it cuts out the audience in the scene in the gymnasium. They're all stomping their feet and all that. It's so loud, but it really needs to be. It really needs to get the point across of what's happening. Oppenheimer is just having a hard time, but he's also just saying these things to the crowd. He's saying, like, if we could have dropped another one, we would have. Like, he's saying it to the crowd to get them hyped up, because he really doesn't. I think he doesn't want to get them distraught, but he's feeling it, because you get those scenes where he's just trying just to look around. He's like basically struck by all this horror, and then you get the one scene where he's walking away. He steps in like a carcass that's just ash, and that's just horrifying. One of the most horrifying scenes of the year for me. I mean, I can't even put to words, but I think if this scene was like 5 minutes longer, I think we would have seen some more horrible parts in the scene happen. And we even see like someone's face peeling off, a scream from the distance after the audience is cheering. And he's walking out, he sees people kissing under the bleachers, people crying, someone's throwing up outside because everyone is just feeling some sort of different way about what happened. You had your little thoughts about the scene. I want you to go basically further and basically tell me what you liked about it and what you didn't like about it, because I know you have a little bit of gripes with the specific scene.
I think the sound design and just the art direction of it was probably some of the best in the movie and some of the worst in the movie. I think that my only gripes from the entire movie is this scene. I think that the sound design and of the warbling and the in and out perspective that we have of Oppenheimer is very good.
Yeah, you like the
And
whole
then we get to
motion of it, right? You just don't like the
yes,
sound.
I did not like the sound design for the audience, and this is my one gripe for the movie. This is it. The movie is still ranked very highly for me, and it's a small gripe,
Yeah, because
but
it's a really
go ahead.
small thing to talk about. But I mean, the score and kind of sound design of Nolan's films has always been messed up in little parts, but it's kind of easy to gripe on that because it's such a little gripe, so it doesn't mess with your overall experience too much. But I still get what you're saying about, you can have those little gripes because in a movie this big and this good, it's really hard to find a gripe. When you do, you're like, oh yeah, that's a little gripe, but I can still notice it. This kind of builds though to the film reel scene when he's basically getting the newsreel scene against him, and all the scientists are also with him, and they're showing the bodies of the Japanese victims when the bombs were dropped, and how they're kind of talking about how they wore striped clothes, and when the bomb went off, the stripes were on their bodies because they got burned to them. They all died, and you see Oppenheimer. He's still distraught. Nolan did so well at bringing this across. He can't even look at the pictures. We're all in his perspective, and I really do like that because he can't look at the pictures, which means we can't look at them. We're in his perspective. And I kind of want to talk to you about, I've seen a lot of discourse on Twitter personally of certain people are kind of mad that they didn't show the bomb dropping on Japan and all the travesty there, which I think that would have ruined the movie for me a lot if that happened. I think that would have been very disrespectful to a lot of Japanese audiences. And even though some Japanese people probably don't care, but it's a hard scene to show. And if you showed that would just ruin the whole message of the film. And this is from Oppenheimer's point of view. This isn't from Japan's point of view. You can't just throw a scene in there with Japanese people looking at the sky and a bomb dropping down on them and their faces just getting basically peeled apart from the heat from the bomb.
Been horrible.
It would have been horrible. Yeah, I think people's discourse of it is just kind of just shows how some people are very disgusting and how that shouldn't have been a thing. Christopher Nolan is a very respectful filmmaker, I think. And if he would have showed this scene, this movie probably would have gone down from its 95% Rotten Tomatoes to like a 60%, 65%, because a lot of people would have just been basically grossed out. I think a lot of people would have maybe walked out during that scene. I want to hear your thoughts though on the film reel scene, and Oppenheimer can't even look at it, and your thoughts on them not showing Japan in that scene.
I think it's a very important perspective that we are in Oppenheimer's perspective. He is unable to look at it, so obviously that makes sense that we can't see it. I think it's a very important note there. I think it would have taken sort of the gravity of the situation, and it would have pulled us out of the movie to have seen these horrible things. I think what we saw in the gymnasium was enough to get a semblance of it,
Yeah.
to get a feeling for it. Otherwise, I think it was done very well of just not showing the audience that. It would have really taken us out of the movie, out of the moment.
Yeah, and I think that there's kind of like a 3-part reaction to it. You have the gymnasium scene, like we said, the film tape scene, and then we have the final part of the reaction would be Oppenheimer's meeting with President Truman, which he was played by Gary Oldman. I didn't know who Gary Oldman was going to play, but then Truman came on screen, and I was like, who is playing Truman? And I was like, oh, it is Gary Oldman, isn't it? I couldn't even notice him in it. I feel like that was such a good casting. And then you have that big line where Oppenheimer says, I feel like I have blood on my hands. That's a very big line. Then he exits, and then you can hear Truman saying, get that crybaby out of here. That just kind of builds to the point where, Truman just didn't care. a lot of presidents just don't care about travesties that happen in this age, but Oppenheimer did. He was a big person in this scene, and he didn't really want to drop the bomb in the end, and then they did, and then he had to deal with the consequences, even though he didn't want to. And I feel like I have blood on my hands is a very, very big line, very disturbing line. I want to hear your thoughts on this meeting with Truman, Gary Oldman playing him in that specific line. I have blood on my hands.
I think I very much liked Gary Oldman in that. I could not tell who it was initially either. It was only after going back and rewatching it. I think that it was very important to note that this was our World War II president. It was,
Hmm.
this is the kind of man that we had leading the country at that point. At that time, I think that a very important line too that after Oppenheimer says, "I feel like I have blood on my hands." Truman said, "You're the one that made it. I'm the one that dropped it. Like if there's blood on anyone's hands, it's mine." And he's very lacking remorse,
Yeah.
like very unremorseful. It was
It
very
really
very clear.
it's very like hard to watch some parts of it, but I just love how they're getting those little points across in those very short scenes, cutting to it very quick. They're just going with the fast dialogue. It kind of reminds me of The Social Network, as I told you earlier when we first saw it, because Social Network also had some fast dialogue, a lot of dialogue. This is probably Christopher Nolan's dialogue heavy movie, and I think it just works so well. I think that's why I think it's tied for first place for me. But we're gonna get into the rankings later. But yeah, that scene was just terrific. But then we get to the whole aftermath. Oppenheimer, he's having his security hearing, and Strauss is basically behind all this. You figure it out. Strauss is behind all this. He betrayed him because Oppenheimer made fun and basically humiliated Strauss in front of a lot of important people, and Strauss basically betrayed him and made it so Oppenheimer wouldn't be able to get a security hearing. And he worked with Nichols, one of the general's guys in the movie, and Border, played by David Dastmalchian. I think they all did amazing, but I want to hear your thoughts on the betrayal of Strauss and Robert Downey Jr.'s performance. What do you think of his performance in those scenes that he was in?
Robert Downey Jr. was my favorite actor in this movie. I think he did a wonderful, wonderful job. I think that the mix between the security hearing that we had with Oppenheimer versus the AEC hearing that we had, like both of them were happening simultaneously
Hmm.
in the movie. They did not actually in real life take place like that. I
Yeah.
think it was a very important distinction. It was a callback for their scientists that we saw earlier on in the movie. I think a very very good third act.
And yeah, building off the Oppenheimer security hearing, he's getting questioned hard by Jason Clarke, an actor that I haven't seen in a while in a movie, but I think he did excellent. He gets questioned. Matt Damon's character gets questioned, but I think Emily Blunt, her character gets questioned in this, and she brings it all. I can't believe that she brought it that hard to Jason Clarke in that scene, but she really wasn't scared of him. Jason Clarke's character did the little tactic of moving closer, trying to intimidate a woman, but she really sold her line so well in that scene. Did you like that scene a lot? I want to know. I thought it was actually pretty funny also because she was just laying down the hammer on him. What do you think about those little specific hearing scenes with each different person?
I think what you said as well with Jason Clarke's character. He was a very scary man to deal with in real life, and I think he was portrayed wonderfully. Like just the slow, subtle movement of just bringing his chair closer, getting real close to her, and just laying into her. Like that was,
Yeah,
I
because
think,
that's a real
yeah.
tactic that people use, lawyers even especially. But even in that closed security hearing, it's not like a real hearing, but they could just lay it all down. They could basically do whatever they want because they had all the papers laid in by Border, who wrote all the notes because Strauss gave them all to him with Nichols. I feel like that big betrayal just it leads a lot into it. And then Oppenheimer's kind of like, I don't know if he was his lawyer in that scene, but his lawyer didn't have any notes, so it was kind of terrifying, them just laying down all the facts while Oppenheimer's side didn't have anything to go on. That's just a big part. And I kind of want to build on the AEC hearing with Alden Ehrenreich. He played Han Solo in Solo, if you guys know that. But he kind of almost stole scenes from Robert Downey Jr. in those specific scenes. And I do think that the AC hearing is a big hearing. The little black and white scenes, because we're kind of in this perspective of Strauss's character, and he just wants to get in the cabinet, but his betrayal really does backfire on him, because you have this whole betrayal going on. He's trying to get into the cabinet, but then you have David Hill, who's played by Rami Malek, come in and make the biggest play in history. I think, like, he literally makes it so Robert Strauss doesn't get in the cabinet. His whole life is ruined because of David Hill. He played kind of behind the scenes, because you see Rami Malek in those specific scenes when we meet him. He's really like a silent character, trying to get people to sign the petition, writing things down in the background. But he brought it in. He brought the hammer in that court hearing. And Rami Malek, I think that's one of his best performances. The way he's reading the lines and just showing how he just doesn't care. He just wants to protect scientists. Because, in real life, if you're going against scientists, bro, you got to be prepared. They're smart. They know what they're doing. But, I want to hear your thoughts on the AEC hearing. Alden Ehrenreich, his performance alongside Robert Downey Jr., and David Hill, Rami Malek, his basically performance against Robert Downey Jr. and his big lines during that hearing.
Like I said before, Robert Downey Jr. was my favorite performance of the movie. I think his outbursts and such. Alden Ehrenreich, I think, stole some very key moments from Robert Downey Jr. I think that was a very important distinction of just they both were on the same side to begin with,
Mm-hmm.
and then it diminished very slowly, and it was very important to me.
And because he does have that one line. I don't know if I'm getting it all correct, but he's like, "You're not the most important man in the room. You got to notice that." And you just have Robert Downey Jr.'s character walk out. He does that little fake smile back. I think that's so perfect. I think Robert Downey Jr. is my second favorite performance in the movie. That kind of leads us to the end of the film, where you are at a moment where we saw back in the beginning of the film from Robert Downey Jr.'s perspective, which is kind of the black and white is all Strauss's perspective, and the color is all Oppenheimer's perspective. But we get the talk with Einstein, and this is the part where Robert Strauss is kind of like going against Oppenheimer, because you have Einstein come against him, and Robert Downey Jr. is trying to talk to him, but Einstein just doesn't talk to him at all. That's kind of the turning point of the movie, because Strauss thinks Oppenheimer said something to him, but Oppenheimer's basically just talking about Einstein, about the bomb, and its big effect. And Einstein is just left distraught after that. He's not going to go talk to someone after that. Oppenheimer has his little speech at the end. You have the closing shots of the film and how they're talking about the chain reaction. He said, Einstein said, "We're going to start off a chain reaction." And Oppenheimer has this fantastic line of him saying, "I think we already did." And you have those big scenes of him in the plane looking at all the things passing by, the world just going up in flames, all the different atomic bombs dropping from the sky. And I think that kind of works with our society right now. That chain reaction it ignited so many different things that have happened to this day. But I really want to hear your thoughts on the scene with Einstein and how Strauss's character really saw that scene compared to what it actually was in the closing shots of the film. What do you think about that?
Well, my two overall favorite scenes of the entire movie were the opening and the scenes with Einstein. I think those played a key element in it, and I've liked how he was portrayed, and I loved that. And another great scene to me was the flight, the B-52 pilot, as he was, he saw. Am I still going towards London? I think it was putting Cillian Murphy in the cockpit and seeing that. I think that was great, a beautiful touch, and I think it helped attribute it more to the real world, to modern day.
Did you like the scene, and how did you feel about how Strauss perceived the conversation to how the conversation actually went? How did you feel about how Strauss perceived that?
I thought that was great. I think I love the very Strauss was thought it was against him, whereas in reality it was just had nothing to do with him,
Yeah.
and it was I think I thought that was pretty funny.
All about jealousy in there. But that's basically the end of the film. But we're going to continue our thoughts on the score, cinematography, editing, performances, moments, and we're going to rank it on the Nolan films. And we're going to start with the thoughts on the score. Ludwig van Göransson, we gave a little bit of thoughts in earlier on this review, but I thought the score is just so good. It's kind of hard to rank this with other scores of the year, but I think this gets up there with Across the Spider-Verse. I think it might be better than Across the Spider-Verse on rewatch because it feels like such a complete score. The soundtrack is on Spotify right now. It's like an hour and a half long. And I think Ludwig van Göransson, I think, is excellent in his composing, but I think this might be his best yet. And I feel like he's really the front runner for the Oscar right now for best score. And it fit well with every scene, especially the end scene. There's big sounds right there. And then you have the violins, the strings in the beginning. Trinity Test, score fantastic. I want to hear quick thoughts on the score. How did it rank for you on the year score and just overall thoughts on that?
Score very good. Definitely top 3 for me. I'm a big sucker for synths, and it was beautiful.
That's what I'm saying. It's everyone's having that reaction coming out. They're like on repeat. I've been listening to the Trinity Test song, and then one of the beginning songs. Do you hear the music? I think that's what it's called, and the very ending song when they're talking to Einstein. I've been listening to those 3 songs on repeat. Also, I'm Just Ken. You know, that's a great 4 songs to listen to back to back. But then we have our thoughts on cinematography. Hoyte van Hoytema, one of my favorite cinematographers of all time, maybe my favorite of all time. He does so many other Christopher Nolan films like Tenet, Tenet. Then you have Interstellar, and then he also did Nope from last year. He did Ad Astra with Brad Pitt. Nope was beautiful, but I think this blew Nope out of the water. It's such a simple use of cinematography in shots since you're just looking on simple areas, but they're real areas. But I think what really brings the cinematography together was the IMAX ratio. If you don't see this IMAX, what the hell are you doing with your life? Because it's like double the image. And we don't even have a real IMAX theater where we're at. We're kind of like in a Limax, but you can really do see a lot more image. I wish I could have seen it in the real IMAX theater. It's probably life-changing for any of you who did. But the cinematography by Hoyte van Hoytema, so beautiful, so elegant. I want to hear your thoughts, Rowan. What do you think of the cinematography? And, you know, share some of your favorite shots of the use of the camera in this one.
I don't think it blew Nope out of the water, but I think it was still pretty damn good. I think the bomb scene, just like the cinematography with that. I really like the school environment and just the small depictions of Los Alamos. And just sort of the shots that they had with that. Some of my favorite in the movie were from Los Alamos, and I really appreciated those.
I really do agree with you on the school scenes. I think I think they shot it a different way with the school scenes to make it a little bit darker. And I do love how Cillian Murphy, he does look a lot like Oppenheimer in this film, but the way they use different hair for the school scenes because he's a lot younger, he really does look a lot younger in that scene, and I think it works a lot. And then you have the end scene in the White House where he looks a lot older because it takes place. But I feel like whoever did the makeup and hairstyling for this film so well. We're not going to go full in on makeup and hairstyling, but it's not a big part. But I think Cillian Murphy's makeup and hairstyling really worked a lot. You could see all the different aging that he did throughout the film. But I kind of want to stop a little bit on editing, the editing of the movie. I think editing is a huge process in a movie because you could really have a final cut of the movie and it's really different. You could have a rough draft of the movie. It's 4 hours long, but they cut it down to 3. But you could also have fast edits in the movie, basically not a lot of edits in the movie. But this movie has a lot of fast editing in it, and I think it works a lot because it's a biopic, 3-hour biopic. It's hard to keep people really in the moment in this movie. It's hard to keep people really entertained in a biopic. You see a lot of people not entertained, but as we said before, a lot of people were entertained. A lot of people were just leaning forward in their seats. If you go to movies a lot, you can see some people leaning forward in their seats. I was doing a lot. I bet you were doing that too, Rowan, a lot.
Oh yeah.
But I want to hear did you like the little fast editing techniques that they used, and how did you feel about basically the runtime? Did you think the runtime worked with the editing, or what'd you think about that?
I think it worked very well. I've been finding myself in sort of a weird stalemate with 3-hour movies recently, where it feels like it drags in some spots. I think the pacing of this was wonderful. I don't have any criticisms with that. I think the small little editing techniques that they do throughout the movie, nothing straight comes to mind, and that's kind of the point with it. And I really enjoy that.
Yeah, I do actually agree with you on 3-hour ranking, 3 hours in movies, because we even talked about this when we first got out. But a lot of movies past COVID have gotten that 3 hour, because before COVID, all I remember seeing when a movie was 3 hours was maybe Endgame. That was like my first 3 hour movie, my longest movie I've ever seen in theaters. But now, after COVID, we've gotten Avatar, John Wick 3 was like almost 3 hours at least. Mission Impossible, almost 3 hours. Indiana Jones, almost 3 hours. This 3 hours. And you have Dune Part 1, which actually was great. But yeah, I do agree with you. Some movies just don't need it, like Indiana Jones and all that. I wish we did a recording of Indiana Jones. That would have been so funny to talk about that one. But, maybe if this does well, if we both want to keep doing it, we'll talk about more movies, maybe end of the month rankings. I feel like that would be awesome. But yeah, 3 hour runtimes are not great. But as Rowan said, the pacing of this one was excellent. If you want to go into this, the pacing is wonderful. If you need to use the bathroom, though, use it anytime. I don't think there's too many times where you shouldn't, except like the bomb scene and before that. But I would use the bathroom in the first hour, hour and a half, because that last hour and a half are very important moments in history, very important moments that they put to screen. I want to talk about our favorite performances in the movie. First, I'm gonna lead this off. We both kind of have the same favorite performances, but we have different rankings. I want to do top 3 favorite performances. Third place for me. I have a hard time doing top 3s, but I think top 3 is much easier than just naming off 10 people off the top of my head. But third place for me, I think I'm gonna go Rami Malek. That's kind of surprising, probably, but Rami Malek's scene in the hearing, the AGC hearing, just was so good. I was just blown away with his performance. Because I think him in Amsterdam last year, I thought that was a really weak performance by him. He brought it in this movie. He was only in it like 3 minutes total if you combine all of his screen time. And I thought he was excellent in here. I really did love his scene in the hearing. I want to get your number 3 before I move on to number 2. What's your number 3, Ron?
Florence Pugh. Easily.
Do you have any big thoughts about her? She's kind of like in the movie as much as Rami Malek too. What's your favorite part of her? Because you have the first scene with with Cillian Murphy at the party. You have the second scene where they're both talking to each other about him going to marry Kitty. She's crying. Or you have the third scene where they're just talking in her apartment. What's your favorite scene with her in it?
Probably talking in the apartment.
Very, very, very great. Very well done scene right there. Very beautiful how they did it, because they're both naked. If you've seen it, they're both naked in that scene. But it's shot very beautifully, very artistically, so I agree with that. My number 2 is going to be obviously Robert Downey Jr. Come on, what are we doing? Robert Downey Jr. is amazing in this film. He's going to get nominated for Best Supporting Actor. He could even win, but he's going to be going against Ryan Gosling for Barbie. It's an amazing performance by both of them. But Robert Downey Jr., he's in all the black and white scenes. His look is crazy. You hardly notice it's him. If you haven't seen Robert Downey Jr. in a while and you saw him in this movie without any promotion, you would be like, is that really him? But he did so good in this movie. I thought his look of demeanor in this movie, his look of jealousy in certain scenes, it's captured so well on the camera. I want to hear your number 2, Rowan. What do you got for number 2?
It's kind of a triple way tie. If I had to choose between, if I were to do a top 5, this would be easier.
No top 5
I thought about Casey Affleck. I thought about Dane DeHaan. Really, my second place is Jason Clarke.
Oh, really?
With his Roger Robb character, I think just the subtlety of the role, and just a small role comparatively. And I maybe wanted to give this to Matt Damon.
Did you have Cillian Murphy in there?
To give this to Rami Malek. But I don't. I don't have Cillian Murphy in there.
Oh, wow.
I think the small supporting roles were very, very important, and I think
especially
the might of God kind of role Jason Clarke had was very important to me.
I can actually agree with that. Those supporting performances kind of outdo a lot of leading performances, because I almost put Gary Oldman in there. His little line at the end, like we were talking about, is crazy. Benny Safdie did amazing. Jason Clarke, as you said, so damn good. And Alden Ehrenreich, I think he would have been my 4 if we did top 5. But I do love your top 2 choice. I think it works a lot. My number 1, though, is Cillian Murphy. I'm a big Cillian Murphy lover. I think that he really shows it in Christopher Nolan movies. He's been a supporting actor in his movies for a long time, ever since Batman Begins. He was actually going to go be Batman. He did a screen test in a Batman suit, but he didn't get it. Christian Bale got it, but Cillian Murphy did excellent as Scarecrow in that movie. But he was also in Dunkirk, Inception, and Dark Knight Rises, all those. But he finally got the leading role in this movie because Christopher Nolan saw American Prometheus. He was given the book by Robert Pattinson, if I'm correct, and he saw the book and he's like, who would I cast in this? And he's like, Cillian Murphy. That's who I'm going to cast. And I think that's a perfect casting choice. Cillian Murphy is a fantastic and I think underrated actor. I don't know if Rowan, if you've seen the Quiet Place movies, have you seen those movies?
Yes.
Cillian Murphy, I think one of my first times I really noticed Cillian Murphy as a fantastic actor was in The Quiet Place Part 2. I think that he was a great supporting actor in that movie, and that movie came out like 2021, I think, and he was perfect in that. But him in this, he's an absolute powerhouse. I said in my review earlier, but he can show a lot of emotion through his eyes because that's who Oppenheimer was. He didn't show a lot of emotion. He really didn't smile a lot because of his tormented childhood that he went through. But Cillian Murphy, he just has a way with words, has a way of speaking through the lines, especially during those hearing scenes, security hearing scenes, and how he's just playing a back. He can't even stand up to his own wife because he couldn't stand up to bullies when he was a child. But I think Cillian Murphy, though, he brought an absolute powerhouse performance. I think he's one of the prominent leaders to win Best Actor next year at the Oscars. But you do have many other people going for that award: Leonardo DiCaprio in Killers of the Flower Moon, Joaquin Phoenix in Napoleon, Bradley Cooper in Maestro. It's going to be hard to win that, but I think Cillian Murphy really has the best leading performance of the year so far. But we're going to go with Rowan. What's your number one performance of the movie? You kind of said it earlier, but you can build on that.
Robert Downey Jr. I think that the secret cabinet meetings that they had was very important. I love him moving the plant and just like you start talking. I especially loved the hearing towards the end of the movie, and his outburst at the very end of the movie is really what sealed it for me.
Yeah, he's like, I controlled it. I knew what I was doing, and he really did try to control it, but he couldn't do it because Alden Ehrenreich knew that he wasn't controlling the situation. David Hill controlled the situation. I think your top three are awesome. Everyone could have a different top three. You guys should leave your top three in the comments if you made it this far. Hopefully you have. But yeah, every top three works for me because you have so many great actors in this movie. And I think everyone just brought their best because it's a Christopher Nolan movie. They all wanted to act their ass off, wanted to show their best in this movie. So any top three is excellent in this movie. Our favorite moments of the movie, I kind of want to do a top three of this, Rowan. And I'm going to let you start with your third favorite moment of the movie. Any moment, could be a very small moment, could be a very big moment. What's your third favorite moment of the movie, you think?
My third favorite would probably have to be any of the communist parties. I think those orchestrated how we perceived Oppenheimer very early on, and I really liked those.
I agree with you that, especially the party scenes at his house. It's kind of hard to articulate some scenes in this movie. My third favorite scene probably has to be David Hill in the AC hearing, in the specific lines that he said. And I just think that's amazing. You see the crowd just have an outburst when he says how David Hill says these lines. Rami Malek says the lines of how Robert Strauss basically made all the events with Oppenheimer come true. He basically betrayed him. And you have those shots of Oppenheimer in the courtroom, the black and white IMAX. The first time we have black and white IMAX. It's insane. Very good moment. My third favorite. Rowan, we're going to go back to you. What's your second favorite moment of the movie?
Specifically the starting school scene with the poisoned apple. I think just the lecture and just sort of the slow build of that really got to me.
Yeah, that's an amazing scene. I love how it's shot. I love how it just goes on Cillian Murphy. I bet your scene kind of goes into where he's in bed. You have those scenes of the quantum realm. That's in that scene for you.
Yep.
You think that would lead into that also?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect scene. Second place for me, I really do like his talks with Gene Tatlock, but I don't think that'll make it in my top three. My number two scene, though, it probably has to be when I'm going to go with you. I'm going to go with you on this one, the opening school scenes. I was kind of choosing between them, but I think you're absolutely right. The opening school scenes hit so hard in the poison apple, and when he takes it from Niels Bohr and says wormhole, and I'm like, oh my gosh, no way. But I think those scenes are awesome. You're just looking down at him in his bed, his eyes, he's so terrified of what's about to happen because he can kind of like see the quantum realm, see what's going on, the rain dropping down on the cement. I think that's a perfect scene. That's my number 2. Rowan, what is your favorite scene of the movie? Just, I know you've only seen it like once or twice right now, but you could change in the future. But what's your favorite scene in the movie so far?
The starting scene with Einstein.
The
I think
starting
that's
scene?
such a key and important scene, and just it's a small scene, but that's my favorite.
So you like the first like 30 minutes of the movie. Those are like masterpiece moments, right?
Yeah, well, I think it started really strong. I I like the movie. The first act has a lot of important like details for me. The third act, with my favorite performance with Robert Downey Jr. And the second act of just tying it all together, making it work, showing the relationships and dynamics of everyone. But my favorite scenes are from the start of the movie.
That's perfect. A lot of great scenes there. My favorite scene, I've seen it twice so far. As I said, I want to go back and watch it a lot. It's going to be in IMAX for 3 weeks, just letting you guys know. It's probably going to be there until Gran Turismo takes it over, so watching the IMAX before its screens get taken over, because we're kind of have a shortage of IMAX screens in all of America. So it kind of like, this is the first where a movie gets 3 weeks in IMAX, so you better go see it multiple times before it leaves IMAX. My favorite scene, though, has to be the Trinity test. I had a hard time choosing between that and the gymnasium scene. I think the Trinity test, it got me so scared when I first watched it. Goosebumps all over my arms. I did not know what was going to happen. I even leaned over to you, Rowan, and I was like, this is about to be scary. This is about to be fantastic. And I'm like, holy crap. When they drop the bomb, the silence. I think what makes this scene number 1 for me, though, is the audience. Our audience is just so quiet during the whole movie, so leaned into it. I think that scene is just great. And then you get that big line, I become death, destroyer of worlds. Perfect scene. But I do agree with the top 3 scenes. I think they're all amazing. Overall, though, we're gonna give our scores out of 10. You can use decimals, Rowan. I was at a 9.7 when I came out of the film the first time, but I think just us talking about it for an hour, I think I've raised it to a 9.8 out of 10. The whole movie is just amazing. 0.2 marks is crazy. Like, I don't even have, the only movie I have at 9.8 or 9.9 right now is Across the Spider-Verse for this year. All the other ones are like 96, 95, but this movie just is so good. I think this could go up a couple marks if I see it a couple more times. Rowan, what do you have this out of 10, and what are your overall thoughts on it?
9.6.
Ooh, 9.6.
It has not gone up or down for me. I think even on my second rewatch, I liked the whole movie as a whole. My one problem that brings me back is just the gymnasium, and there were some not awkward pacing, but just an awkward moment here or there where it briefly, just ever so slightly, took me out of the movie. And the gymnasium scene is the one that I think back to. Not enough to ruin the movie for me, not enough to ruin the scene for me. I really liked a lot of the pieces in that, but it was enough to make me think and take me out of the movie for even just a second of just like, that looked kind of weird,
Yeah.
and just made me think about it more than I should have.
Yeah, I can agree with your thoughts on this, but if someone has a little gripe like that, I can really see it. But if someone rates this movie below like a 7 out of 10, maybe a 7.5, I'll be like, what movie did you watch? Because I watched
Yeah,
Oppenheimer.
even lower than an 8. Yeah.
You're crazy. Like, I kind of want to talk about rewatchability before we go on the Nolan ranking. I watched this a second time and I was like, this is kind of even better. And I feel like this is such an easy film to rewatch because of its fast editing, lots of dialogue. It keeps you focused on the goal, the score. I want to hear your thoughts. Do you think you'll be rewatching this on home video? Do you think it has a lot of rewatch value for other people? How do you think about that little rewatch value of this movie?
Very much so. I think it's very rewatchable. I think, especially as a period piece of as a World War II movie, I think it's got like super replayability. I'd put this on wanting to watch this more than I would want to watch Dunkirk, for instance. And Dunkirk is really good.
Yeah,
And I think as the World War II movie, this is it for me.
Dunkirk is amazing. That's why I kind of compare it to The Social Network, because Social Network is one I go back to a lot for dialogue reasons. I feel like some of it's very slow there, though. But I think I'll go back to this one a lot. I think this one is my favorite biopic of all time. Before we get on to our other Nolan rankings, I was going to have another friend on this one because we were going to have it 3 people, but he sadly couldn't make it. But we probably hope to do this again. I don't know if Rowan, you want to do this again? I thought this was awesome to do.
I'd be more than happy to.
We could do like different spoiler discussions, end of the year, end of the month rankings of different movies we saw. But yeah, hopefully we can get 2 other friends in here, another friend in here to make it a whole conversation. But man, just an emotional film. I'm probably going to go watch it a couple more times. I don't know about you, Rowan. How do you feel? Do you think you're going to go watch it again? How do you really feel about this one?
Probably not. I've seen it my 2. I'll probably rewatch it before the end of the year, but probably not during its theater run.
I respect it. There's a lot of movies coming out, a lot of different things that are happening, especially in August. You do have that SAG strike and writer's strike. We do support them fully. So you might have a lot of delays during the end of the year. We might see a lot of movies move, so maybe this is the only movie to watch in all the August movies. Who knows? But I would be happy just watching this, keeping it in theaters the rest of the year. I would watch it many more times. If Dune gets delayed, I'll cry. But, you know, we're going to end it off where does it rank by other Nolan movies for you? For me, I think this is top 2 Nolan, maybe top 1, because this movie is just very, very different from a lot of his other films. It's kind of the same as Dunkirk, though, but also very different. But I think it's top 2 and top 5 for a lot of other people that I've talked to. Rowan, where does it rank for you on Nolan rankings?
Number 1. Number 1.
Really? Very surprising. What do you have at number 2?
Personally, I have The Dark Knight Rises.
Oh, wow, you're a Dark Knight Rises lover. I love to talk to people who love Dark Knight Rises because I see a lot of hate on the internet for that one. I do think it's great. I don't love it as much as you probably, but I do love the story of a rebirth of his character and how he rises out of the cave. I just don't like Talia al Ghul in that one. I know it's not a Dark Knight Rises video, but yeah, I think Dark Knight Rises is pretty awesome. But any other thoughts on the movie, Rowan, before we end it off?
I could not more highly recommend this as one of your top 3 movies to watch this year. If I had to say you had to watch any movies this year, I would put this for sure up there, next to Spider-Man, and then as well as Barbie. So
yeah, just a little bit talk about Barbie probably before we end. What an amazing weekend for movies! Probably my favorite, one of my favorites weekends in history of cinema. Both those movies did excellent. We both saw Barbie and Oppenheimer, and we both gave it a great review. We both loved Barbie, and this movie is just absolutely doing so well at the box office like Barbie. A lot of you guys went to see a double feature of it. It's just an amazing experience. So we're going to end it off right there. Let us know if you love these little talks that we had. This is a podcast video, so no video of us for now. Hopefully, maybe in a year future, we can get some cameras on here. We can meet up in person and do this. But it's best if you just listen to our voices and listen to our topics on this. But if you guys want us to do this more, we will. We're very entertained. But that's all for the Oppenheimer spoiler discussions. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, leave your thoughts on the movie, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out.